Welcome back to the Emberpelt Modder's Survival Guide. Last time we successfully established Ashford, our colony of Emberpelts. With the basics, food, water, shelter, and population growth, taken care of, the wealth of new options in our mods, especially when it comes to tech, at first can seem overwhelming. However, before we get to parsing those, there's one major bottleneck we have to overcome first: resources. While the Emberpelts have a myriad of options later in their tech tree, to get to any of it, we need to figure out two mandatory basic ones: the classic scrap metal, and brand new to the Emberpelts, clay. Much like scrap metal, clay is a material that usually requires processing before we can begin utilizing it. Since getting clay and metal off the ground will also require gears, we'll need to spend this episode planning out a temporary industry, and gearing ourselves up for taking full advantage of the Emberpelt's first unique power source: charcoal. We'll finish off by permanently relocating our industry away from valuable irrigated land and planting the seeds somewhere far away from the looming threat of unexpected moisture. So let's get started on scrap, metal, gears, clay, bricks, power, industry, and charcoal. We are back in Ashford, and I'm going to cut the preamble because we have a lot to do today. So let's get started on clay. Clay is going to be our first unique resource for the Emberpelts. If we come down here to industry, right in the middle we will have clay pit. As we can see, this takes 20 logs and 10 planks to build, which will be no problem. It takes 100 research to unlock, and then once we have it, it employs 2 beavers. It'll also take 1 water every 1.5 hours and produce 6 clay. This can be built anywhere on any type of ground. It can be built on unirrigated ground. It can be built on irrigated ground. You could technically build it in water, though it won't function if it is flooded, just like any other building. But for now, I'm going to build it up here on this ridge, and I'm just going to unlock it. We're going to build a path over. Now, this is probably not where this will stay. I will want to end up bunching this together with like buildings later on when we have everything planned out, but for now, this is a good enough spot. I am also going to preemptively build another small tank as well as another water pump. The 1 water every 1.5 hours is going to be about 1/3 of what our water pumps create at 1 water every 1/3 of an hour. I don't think a single clay pit is going to impact our water production that much, but I am just going to preempt it in case it does have more of an effect than I am hoping. And then with our beavers building this clay pit, we need to talk about where to store clay. This is pretty simple. It is just an industrial pile that we need. We can set this to clay. I'm building the smallest one possible because I think that most of this clay is going to end up being transitive and not sticking here in the clay pit. And we will end up moving it fairly quickly. And our clay pit is done, so as we will see, it is currently employing 1 beaver. That is going to be enough for us right now. It is going to slowly produce clay, and then obviously they will move it here. So now we are producing clay. In fact, we've filled this up with clay, and we don't have a pile yet, so this beaver is currently not doing anything. There is very little that we can do with clay in this state. The one thing that we really can do, if we come down here to industry, right next to the clay pit, we have the kiln. Now this is going to take 6 clay, a little bit of wood, take 3 hours, and produce 6 bricks. Now the kiln is going to take 15 logs, 10 planks, and 12 raw clay. And then it gives us basically the only other thing we can do with clay, which is turn it into bricks. 6 clay, 1/10 of a log, and 3 hours is going to produce 6 bricks. Now, if you did the math, you would see that technically 2 kilns are going to be needed for every 1 clay pit, which produces clay at a rate of 6 to every 1.5 hours. Right now, we're not going to be super worried about that math because We just don't need to be. We need bricks at any cost. So we're going to unlock this for 200 science points. This does not require power, so we are just going to put it right here next to our clay pit. Again, this is not where these will stay, but it is somewhere where this can go for now. Before moving on, though, we will need somewhere to store these bricks. Unlike the clay, which is stored in industrial piles, bricks are going to be stored in a warehouse. So we will put that right here and we will set it to bricks. And then before we move on, real quick, I am actually going to touch on charcoal. So the big thing we are moving towards here is going to be a charcoal engine. I'll cover that at the end of the episode. But to make a charcoal engine, we are going to need metal. To make metal, we need a smelter. And to turn scrap into metal blocks, we are going to need charcoal. Now, right now, even though I will probably build a kiln and then pause it because we don't currently have the workers to have it running, I am going to build a kiln, set it to charcoal, and then they will have to build this as time goes on. That will allow us to build up the charcoal for when we move on to our smelter and our engines. Charcoal is also going to be stored in industrial piles, much like clay. So I will build this out here and set this to charcoal. Now that is going to be a rate at 3 wood every hour to 2 charcoal. Now that may seem like a loss, especially when looking at something like the smelter, which takes basically the same amount of charcoal as an irontooth or folktail smelter takes of logs. But generally, the smelter is not where we are going to be using most of our charcoal. So it ultimately ends up being a good trade-off for most things. Maybe just not the smelter. But since we are talking about it, we should also talk about scavenger flags, because we can't do anything with the smelter without having scrap. Now, unfortunately, this map does not have a good close source of scrap to the starting area. As we can see, we have some up here, we have some up here, and we have some way out here. Now, unless I wanted to build us a path going all the way out here, we are going to need to use lots of stairs. I did do a bit of pre-planning on this one. This scrap tower is slightly closer than this scrap tower. They both end up using about the same amount of staircases. So we are going to build a path along this mountain to get up to this scrap tower. Now we are going to take this opportunity to unlock platforms. Those are exactly the same as normal. 2 logs, 4 planks, 100 science points. We want to keep our ember pelts out of the water, so we are going to build them up here. And then I believe if I do it from right here, I should have a straight shot up this mountain without having to use any platforms. And then with just a few paths, and what I have to assume will be quite a bit of time, we can get our beavers all the way up here to start grabbing some scrap metal. So since this is going to take its sweet time, and we also need to build up some research points while we wait, I'm going to move on to a few maintenance things around the colony. So first of all, I'm going to move our district center. Now, if you were not aware, if you come down here to district management, district center doesn't cost anything. Partially because it's supposed to cost something to set up gates if you are separating districts. So I could set up a new district center, for instance, right here. Or right here. Now, if I were to do that, it would get mad at me if I tried to put a path here and hook up this district center, because it needs to be a separate district. But there is nothing preventing me from destroying this district center, having all these errors while the game is paused, and then hooking up this other district center. It will say District 2, but the district center will now be utilized by our beavers. On a map like this one, that's particularly useful because it opens up this irrigated land and allows me to put the district center on something that we will not be able to farm on very quickly. And then I can start reconfiguring this area for other things. For example, I want to take this gatherer flag and put it here, destroying this one. I'm going to work towards demolishing all these berries, but I'm going to start out by planting more berries. Right over here. And right here. That should, if we plan correctly, hit the limit of what this forester can plant. I am going to demolish one line of these berries for now, just so that we can hook up our path and get a quicker path between these two sides. And we have a drought, which largely won't affect us that much. I will turn on another water pump just so that we can be pumping out water. But most of what we've currently got is drought proof, more or less. With that drought now over, there is something that we need to take care of that I was actually unaware of until recently. Up here we can see that we have 3 unhoused beavers. Now, obviously, we can just build another lodge, and that would be that. But there is actually a special mechanic for the Emberpelts that makes this a little bit easier. So while we could build a bunch of lodges, and maybe even build some up higher on here and build stairs up to them, lodges for the Emberpelts function differently than they do for any other faction. Now, it does not say anywhere on the tooltip, but if we were to build a lodge on top of another lodge, such as this, and our beavers actually get to it, we will see that it immediately fills up with our 3 unhoused beavers, because lodges internally work the same way ladders do. So a lodge built on top of another lodge will allow beavers to be transported upward. Now, this is not just limited to living in the upper space. If I were to take a lodge and build it facing this way, we would be able to build a path out of it and then use this space over here to, say, put another lodge. Now, in this case, that wouldn't do much because there isn't anything up here for the beavers to really do. Now, if I were then to build an industrial pile up here, like this, beavers would be able to move through the lodges to get up here to this industrial pile without needing a staircase or a ladder. Now, that is not really necessary with what we currently have built, so I am just going to repeat what we already have on a second floor. And we will let our beavers build that, even though we currently have enough housing. Our population will probably grow to about 2025, and we may need all these extra beds. While I am over here, I'm also going to slap down a hauling post. We do not currently have all the beavers we need for it, but our population is growing, and we will need one by the end of the episode. It's only 20 logs and 10 planks, and it doesn't cost any research. So we are going to build one of those, and then I will set it currently to a single workplace. And now that these new blueberry bushes are about a third of the way through producing blueberries, and we have so many stored over here, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to delete resources on all of these bushes. Because while I said earlier that raw clay has very few uses outside of building a kiln or turning into bricks, one of the uses that it has that we can access early on is going to be down here under food. For the Emberpelts, we start out with grills unlocked. Now, these are going to take 20 logs and 6 clay. Now, while right now we can't make the roasted bell peppers or the grilled beets because we do not have canola oil, we can make grilled corn. Of course, that does require us to plant corn. We have quite a large area over here now, which is within range of our farmer, and we will use that for corn. Now, while this is going to be a smaller area than the tomato or the radish, and about the same size as the bell pepper, corn this early on is going to be the best food source per tile. It does, of course, require processing, so it's going to be 1 corn, 1/10 of a log, and produce 4 corn every half hour. And it takes that clay to build, but since every corn plant produces 2 corn every 10 days, that means every 10 days and half hour, we are going to be producing 8 corn for every single tile that we have corn on. So we are just going to build a single grill right here next to our district center and housing. This doesn't require power, obviously, so that's fine. We will set that to grilled corn. That'll only end up taking 1 job from any of our beavers because the corn is already on this farmer. So that should be relatively easy to incorporate. I will give us a small little path up here from this farming area, and then we will build a warehouse for our grilled corn. Now, the size of this warehouse is probably a little bit overkill right now. I assume they will eat the corn pretty quickly after it is finished over here, but if we do have extra, they can store it there. I will also give us just a small little warehouse for storing the raw corn, but again, I'm pretty sure the transit between these 2 spots is going to be pretty quick. And with all of that being done, we can come down here to industry. We can unlock our scavenger flag for 250 science points. We will just be placing 1 right now. We will give an industrial pile up here. We will set that to scrap metal. We will set it to supply, and we will just kind of use this as a buffer since it is such a long distance between up here and our town. And with all that being built, let's move on to establishing our temporary industry. So as I've said before, we are building towards these charcoal engines. That is going to take gears and metal blocks. So we are going to have to establish a way to get gears and metal blocks. We have our scavenger flag up here, which has been scavenging. We have quite a bit of scrap metal. We have a decent number of planks we can turn into gears. And we have the required materials for building a smelter and a gear workshop. However, we cannot very easily stuff this stuff up here where our lumber mill currently is. So we are going to instead come down here to this part of the river. Now, this is the confluence of both river flows, so I'm hoping that it is going to have more than enough power generation for a gear workshop and a smelter. We are going to hopefully be able to, without much issue, build 2 water wheels here. We will, of course, have to get our beavers down here. This may seem like overkill, but they are going to have to bring materials from up here all the way down to down here while our temporary industry is running. And I want this path because eventually we will end up using this irrigated land for farming. Now, with these 2 water wheels built, it looks like our network supply ranges between 200 and 300, so I am going to in fact build a 3rd water wheel here. But while they do that, we can go ahead and start building our industrial buildings. If we go to industry, we will need the gear workshop. 1 plank, 120 horsepower, 3 hours produces 1 gear. It's 15 logs, 25 planks, 100 science points. I'm pretty sure that's exactly the same as any other gear workshop for any other faction. We will go ahead and put that right there. And then our standard smelter is going to be 3 scrap metal, 1/10 of a charcoal, 200 power, 3 hours to produce 2 metal blocks, 300 science points, 50 planks, 20 bricks, and 30 scrap metal to build. We will unlock that. We will place it right here next to our gear workshop so we benefit from them being next to each other. I am actually going to just switch these around because it will line up better. That is going to be a total of 320 horsepower that is needed. Depending on the flow, it looks like we may have that with just 2 water wheels, but I will build a 3rd just in case. I will also build us some storage, an industrial pile for our blocks of metal, small piles for scrap metal and planks, which will be set to obtain, and a medium warehouse, 4 gears. I will set that to supply, but it's the only one we have, so it won't really matter right now. And we will let our beavers get building on all of that. It may take a little while as we have 20 planks, and this project will require about 75. So I will sit through that, and I will see you when we're done. And with all of that done and running, it is time for us to move on to engines. So we currently have 2 disparate industrial areas. I could move this lumber mill down here and just kind of build some stuff up here. But ultimately, since we're going to be building engines anyway, I think it would be better to just get all of this moved up to where it will be, at least for now. So if we were to come down here to power, we would see that we have 3 options for engines. We have the small engine, which only takes logs. It costs 200 logs, 10 planks, and 12 clay. We could have made this at any time thus far, but personally, I think it's kind of a waste when it's pretty easy to get to the point where you can create the engine. Now this is going to cost 20 logs, 25 gears, and 20 metal. It is going to take charcoal instead of logs. It's going to cost 400 science points. And for the same amount of charcoal as it takes logs, it is going to produce double the amount of power. Now, if the math on that seems odd, because we get out less charcoal than we put in wood, the math on that is that the small engine is going to require 2 engines and take 4.8 logs per day to produce 500 horsepower. The regular engine is going to take 2.4 charcoal a day for 500 horsepower, which is about the equivalent of 3.6 logs. So you're saving roughly a log a day and quite a bit of space using engines as opposed to small engines. So that's why I prefer to skip them and just go straight to engines. We are going to build up our current industry on this plateau above our current district. That's going to require repositioning some things over here and building a staircase up. And with that complete, we will go ahead and unlock this regular sized engine and we will build it right here. This was, of course, the reason that we built the hauling post, because engines do not work without an active hauling post with employees. And we will connect that up. And I will start by duplicating our smelter and our gear workshop up here. Now, the one thing I do not want to do just yet is get rid of any of our current industrial buildings until these are finished, because I do that quite often. And then I end up having to rebuild everything because I don't pay attention to the fact that, for example, a smelter requires planks, and I've destroyed our plank production, and then I have to rebuild it and all that kind of stuff. So we'll let this finish building before we destroy anything. And now I'm building our smelter and our gear workshop, but I'm actually not going to build a lumber mill up here. Because if we come down to industry, we will see that while we have the regular lumber mill, there is also an option for a large lumber mill. This is going to take 20 logs and 10 planks, so it's more expensive than the regular lumber mill. It's about 50% more horsepower, but if we look at the math here, it takes the same amount of logs but produces planks about twice as fast. It's only 250 science points. It does employ 2 beavers, so we will just build that right here. If you're worried about it, this configuration will obviously end up changing because I can never be happy with the way anything turns out, and I love rebuilding everything I do. We will, however, as always, build some storage for things that we need. So we will take planks up here. This will just be normal planks. That was logs that we're taking up here. We will create gears, but we will export them. We will need scrap metal being brought and regular metal being exported. And then we will have 2 piles bringing charcoal up to this ridge. Since I'm currently playing Calvin Ball with this area, I will also up top build a permanent metal block storage, as well as a permanent plank storage, as well as gears. And then one quick additional thing I want to do, though it is not related to all that, I want to get us more water production and storage. Since we're already storing stuff up here, we can just store even more. So I've realized that these are not going to finish being built because we're waiting on planks and it's the middle of a drought, but I am just waiting on planks so I can safely delete these two. And honestly, all of this, which will allow me to collect some of the planks that were used to create these and use them to finish our area over here. And though we are mid-drought, don't look at any of that over there, we have everything built up here now, which means that we do need to free up some jobs. Hold on. If I turn on this engine, we will now see that our industry, even without inactive water flow, is more than able to function. We will be producing metal blocks, we will be producing gears, and we will be producing planks. I can go ahead and get rid of this building and this water wheel. We've already gotten rid of the water wheel over here. They will clean up that rubble as time goes on. But our industry is now isolated from whatever the whims of the water flow are. And with the water flowing, our crops growing, and our industry established, that is where I'm going to end today's episode. I hope you found this episode informative. If you did and you want to continue to see me play through the Emberpelts, then please consider subscribing. We have a few more Emberpelt specific mechanics to get through, and then we will start adding additional mods to the playset. And speaking of the playset, if you want to play with the mods that I have installed, I have a link to the playset on Steam down below in the description for you to check out. I think you can just click the button once and it'll install all of the mods all at once. I will keep that updated and compatible with the current version of the game that I am running as the episodes go on, so I'd suggest checking that out if you want to play along or just play the Emberpelts yourself. As always, thank you so much for watching. Ashford burns brightly, and I'll see you next time.